Again, I just want to talk about sort of the evolution of fencing and how historical fencing today is actually part of a living tradition. It's not something that just kind of is taken out of books. Because if you're just doing that, you can do that, and after maybe that kind of happened, after 40 years of people training hard, they have just so much experience that they can kind of make everything work and sort of build back what was lost, I suppose. But that didn't really happen. What happened was people basically who knew foil fencing, epee fencing, traditional saber, they worked with people that maybe didn't but who were enthusiastic, and they made sense of all these old manuals, and they also brought their just physical experience, the know-how, knowing where to put their feet in their hands, and worked with people and sparred and fought, and they brought that back to life. I mean, there's nothing at all wrong with being interested in reviving the rapier, and you can do that with like basing it on foil and epee and so forth. That's what people did. I mean, they did. Francesco Loda, Ken Monchain, whoever else. He mentioned these people leading the HEMA movement. I mean, these are all people that spent like years with the foil, with the epee, probably the saber. I know like Roland Fonseca, who's an amazing leader in the HEMA community. His one of his top guys, name's not coming to me right now, but he's a modern saber fencer, and he's uses that to interpret the L33 treaties and so forth. I'm dropping a lot of terms on you, but if you're into this stuff, you'll know what I'm talking about. In any case, so here's a little brief history of fencing. Okay, start with the Romans. They had the short sword, and then the Vikings, really just the continuation of the Roman sword, like the sort of Viking age, Dark Age, very similar. Not much of a handguard. That's because you're really defending yourself with a shield, not with the guard, etc., etc. You can watch videos on that. Who cares? In any case, you get to this important date for us is 1553, when Camillo Agrippa, who's an architect and a fencer, applies the principles of architecture to fencing. Fencing was already scientific in Italy. I mean, you had like Vadi and Fiore back in like the 1400s, 1300s, applying science to sword fighting. That was already established that people would do this. In 1553, Agrippa makes it even more scientific by using the point more. So it's more about taking that reach advantage away from the opponent. He's all cutting, you're stabbing. But it's, of course, how that you exactly do that is complicated. Interestingly enough, exactly 100 years later, or exactly, in the year 100 years later, 1653, we have the first recorded use of what we would call the French foil system, where you take turns. And I think it was for safety reasons. So it's my turn to attack, I attack, you have to defend, okay? And then you get to attack back. And this way we don't poke each other's eyes out. Now, mind you, there's evidence going back in time that the Vikings talk about trading attack and defense and practicing fencing like that. That makes a lot of sense. But in any case, there's a lot of safety elements of this, because if you're both stabbing at the same time, someone's eye is going to get knocked out. Take it in the neck. Yeah, they had protective equipment. It wasn't really that great. And a lot of the times, guys would be training with sharp swords too. Keep this in mind, because they're very serious about learning to use their real weapons. So the foil is historical. 1653. I mean, it was that you're using bigger swords, but the whole principle of the trading trading turns, right? Modern foil is about, well, it's my turn to attack, you got to defend, and then it's your turn to attack. Now, if I get to the end of the piece, I'm running out of space to just back up, so I've got to know how to block, and that was called fighting at the wall. They trained for this. So I'm stuck here, you attack, I got to be really good at parrying, and if I'm not good at parrying, well, tough luck for me, right? So, foil's historical. Mind you, when the defensive equipment got a little bit better, in France, about half of the clubs were preferring to fight with what now is evolved in what we call the epee. It's very similar to a rapier. It's bigger than the foil, and that's where just whoever hits first wins. It's still it's still sportified, because what if I stab you like 1/2 of a second before you stab me? We're both going to die. So I mean, there's a little bit of that in there, but still, I mean, to have some kind of it's sensible. It's some sort of way to practice. A lot of HEMA rules, although wasn't supposed to be too sportified, but it's kind of getting like that. They're saying kind of like kendo, similar to sort of like kendo, you have to hit while not being hit. So that's kind of interesting. I think actually traditional foil rules were something like that too. In any case, actually, if you look at the lengths of these things, like rapier, I mean, the blade's like pretty much the same as the epee and the foil, not really much difference. Okay, so like, I mean, it's a living tradition. It's like you know, the guys like rebuilding rapier, a lot of them, they just go to the, you know, they themselves would be foil experts and epee experts. So I think like dividing out HEMA, at least for the rapier, from these other things, I think is a little bit silly. Also considering, I don't know too much of a longsword, but I mean the saber is a cutting weapon, so there's going to be a lot of crossover with that as well. Certainly historical saber. Yeah, so I think that's sort of my point. Is it's a living thing. So when you're taking up rapier, I mean you're taking part in a tradition, a living tradition, human to human, being passed on for generations from 1553. And if you're talking about foil, that continued that tradition, but with this idea of trading turns, right? And that's very historical for a lot of good reasons. Because you don't want to go at the same time and get stabbed. So you learn how to defend. And that's from 1653. There you go. So that's very historical. 1653 is a long time ago. And I think, yeah, it's time, because we you know, with modern age, we're richer, we have more time and money, and we can, you know, spend money on stuff like this. So let's rebuild rapier, and you know, you can transfer this stuff over to rapier or other historical swords and enjoy it, have a good time, and you know, connect with the ancestors of fencing if you want, and it's good stuff. Anyway, those are my 2 cents on how modern fencing is historical fencing. Bye bye.